Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to the StokerCon 2021 panel called Steel City Horrors, where we are gathered here with a number of members of the Pittsburgh Chapter of the Horror Writers Association, all gathered to discuss our local community, which is very, let's just say, rich in horror history, horror culture, and as you can see, with our literary culture, a lot of people who write on the dark side. And this is only a small portion of the group that we all know. So we'll probably be talking about other writers in the community. And our purpose today is really just to share what it's like, what makes Pittsburgh a distinct region in the genre. We were chatting briefly as we were getting set up today for this pre-recorded panel. And Salem is a place that people associate with horror. I was born in Amityville, so that's a big horror community. But Pittsburgh, do people think about that? Well, they do once they've seen a George Romero film, and there's a lot more to our area than just that. That's a big part of it. As I just said, this is a pre-recorded panel, so we don't know yet exactly when this will go live or whether it'll just be running the whole time. But if there's a designated time slot, some of us will try to be on hand in the chat room to answer any follow-up questions or issues that might come up from people who are witnessing this atrocity. I'm just kidding. I want everybody to introduce themselves briefly. As you can see, we've got 10 people. So I'll just start us off and then I'll call on people and they can tell us a little bit about where they live in relation to Pittsburgh, or how they see their kind of biography in relation to the region. And maybe tell us a recent project or a book that just came out or something like that. So I'll just start real quick. My name's Mike Arnzen. I've been in the HWA since I think 1989. I've got 4 Bram Stoker Awards in various categories, and I've lived in Pittsburgh since 1999, the end of the last century, where I moved here to join Seton Hill University's Writing and Popular Fiction program as the resident horror author. And so I've been teaching horror novelists, working with them on their books and teaching classes in the graduate school level, MFA program, for 20 plus years now. But that's enough about me. The co-organizer of the Pittsburgh chapter of the HWA is my friend Sara Tantlinger. Sara, why don't you introduce yourself and then call the next person.
Hello, I'm Sara. Like Mike said, I co-organize Pittsburgh HWA with him. I'm about an hour outside of Pittsburgh. I write horror poetry and prose. I'm a 2-time Stoker nominee this year, and I haven't been in Pittsburgh since 2019, but I'll be going back in June since I'm vaccinated. I'm going to get a tattoo and go see the animatronic dinosaur Jurassic Park thing that's coming. So I'm very excited to get back to Pittsburgh and do all that in June. The person next to me on our little gallery thing is RJ, so I'm going to pass it over to you.
Well, I am RJ Murray, published as Ronald J. Murray, the author of Cries to Kill the Corpse Flower and the forthcoming Lost Letters to a Lover's Carcass. I live in Pittsburgh proper currently, and I grew up in a town called Monongahela, Pennsylvania, which is about 20 miles south of Pittsburgh proper, which is full of ghost urban legends, which served as a pretty heavy inspiration for me growing up. So, but yeah, I will call on Gwen next.
Hi, I'm Gwendolyn Kiste, and I am a horror writer. My most recent book is Bone, Set, and Feathers. And I'm about an hour south of Pittsburgh. I'm like kind of halfway between like Pittsburgh and almost like West Virginia. But my husband works in Pittsburgh. And so like I always say all my children, as in all my books, have been born in Pittsburgh because I wrote almost all of them at coffee shops in Pittsburgh. So it's like, I feel like I'm even kind of well known in some of the coffee shops in Pittsburgh. And people are like, oh, look, there's that woman who always kind of pushes it right till we close. And so yeah, I love the region. I grew up in Ohio, but I love Ohio, and I love the Pittsburgh area as well. There's just such a rich horror history. I mean, obviously Romero and Tom Savini's work, and there's so many, obviously, of us. So yeah, I haven't spent a lot of time there in the last year because, we haven't spent much time anywhere except home. But Sarah, Bill and I are going to see the animatronic dinosaurs as well. I am so excited. Like they are coming to the Pittsburgh region next month, and I'm so down for that. So. All right, the next person I see is Corey.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm Corey Niles. My most recent publications were in the HWA Poetry Showcase #7, and I have a story coming out in a Licking Valley Press anthology this fall. And yeah, I was born about 45 minutes outside of Pittsburgh in Newcastle, PA, and I moved to Pittsburgh when I went to college in the MFA program in writing popular fiction. So yeah, I just love the area. I mean, I grew up around Hillview Manor, a great haunted house that made it on Ghost Adventures. And, there's really a great rich history of horror in the area. And the next person on my screen is Michelle.
Hi, I'm Michelle Lane, and I moved to Pittsburgh in 1997. I lived there for about 16 years, and I graduated from the MFA program at Seton Hill with several of the other folks on the panel, and I write horror primarily, and my debut novel was nominated for a Stoker 2 years ago. And I've been trying to get back to Pittsburgh for a long time because it is one of my favorite places on earth. Mainly because it's an urban setting, but it is surrounded by wilderness and it has plenty of places for scary things to hide.
That's true.
I'm going to call on Ben.
Thanks. I'm Ben Rubin. I am a librarian and archivist for the University of Pittsburgh Library System, and I am the curator of the George A. Romero Archive and our other horror archives, and responsible for building a horror studies collection to engage with the academic study with genre and recognize its cultural and social significance. I've been in Pittsburgh for about 15 years. I'm originally from the swamplands of the Florida Panhandle, also rife for horror. And yeah, Pittsburgh's a great place. I think kind of, as Michelle said, it's a good urban setting to get into a city, but it's a small city, so you kind of feel like it's not too overwhelming. So, and I will call on Nelson.
Thanks, Ben. My name is Nelson Pyles. I am an author. I've written 2 novels and a short story collection. I have a new collection of short stories coming out hopefully before the end of the year. I created a podcast called The Wicked Library, for which I also provided the voice for the character of the librarian. I'm no longer with the Wicked Librarian. I actually took the librarian with me, and there will be something new coming from, I guess, the both of us, hopefully before the end of the year. Really fun project upcoming. I've lived in Pittsburgh since 2001, from originally from New Jersey. So coming from Jersey Devil Land and coming to City of the Living Dead was very, very, very cool for me. So much cool stuff. And it's almost medieval. It's like a little city surrounded by mountains and wilderness. It's just fabulous. And I am going to call on Doug Gwilym.
Hey, yeah, I'm Douglas Gwilym. I came the same year you did, Nelson, 2001. I guess first things first, I'm a short story author and an editor, edited Triangulation for 4 years in various capacities there, and have moved on from that as you've moved on from the Wicked Library. That's news to me, man. I'm excited to hear what's next. So for me, I've been here for 20 years. Isn't that a crazy realization? I grew up in the deep wilds to the north, actually in the Youngstown, Ohio Greater Statistical District, which means I got all my TV and radio from there and kind of thought of myself as an Ohioan, though I lived on the PA side. My dad was from Youngstown, so been basically in this area most of my life with some sojourns elsewhere. And, this is an inspiring place, right? I mean, for all kinds of writers. Like I talk to writers in just about every area. But us, I mean, obviously we have a heritage here with Romero. We have a lot of other things. I mean, I think Pittsburgh is sort of the walking embodiment of that character that Stephen King plays in Creepshow, Jordy Verrill. like the farmer who gets overtaken by the alien green. So like the old stuff from the industrial golden age is still here, but like the green is bursting up through it. Like you walk down the street and 100-year-old trees are destroying the sidewalks, and you can go down by the riverbank and see the ruins, and the ruins are grown up and collapsing. And, it was steel, and before steel, it was glass, and before glass, it was iron, and then it was glass back in the early 1800s. This place is an industrial city. And I feel like, the hell with the lid off thing that you hear about with Pittsburgh, that's sort of an advantage of ours, that steaming pile of, what, like the mushrooms that have grown up straight and tall from that, like us, you guys, we're the mushrooms. There's so much weird history here. I used to do a weird history blog, so maybe I'll yammer about that later. A Pittsburgh specific weird history blog, so.
That's great, Doug. One more person left. I'll go ahead and call
I
him.
can't see who's next.
That's all right. It's Lawrence Connolly.
Get
Mr.
out!
Lawrence
Get out!
Connolly,
He's
step on
here.
down.
Oh my God! Hey, I'm originally from the heart of Pittsburgh. I'm originally from Oakland, right there in the Pitt campus area. My family moved from there to Philadelphia. I grew up in Philadelphia, and we came back here. We came back here just in time for the Night of the Living Dead. I spent my high school years here and took off to Chicago as soon as I could. I came back, and I'm just delighted to be hanging with these people. Pittsburgh's a great place. We'll be talking all about that. More to come.
Yeah. All right. As anyone watching this can tell, we have a great group of writers. Everybody's so friendly, and we love hanging out. We always miss our meetings and can't wait to have the next one. And I appreciate that. I've lived in different places across the country. Some of you have too. Not every place is horror friendly. Not every place is writer friendly, to be honest. So we're lucky to have this kind of thriving literary community that is steeped in this weirdness that Douglas was talking about. We're all mushroom people, but Pittsburgh has also a legacy of horror, so that the rest of the world knows us, gets to know us through basically two avenues: sports and horror. And I wonder if anyone on the panel will just open it up. Hopefully we won't talk over each other too much. Anyone on the panel wants to talk about the primary kind of stories that come to your mind when you think of Pittsburgh that maybe the rest of the world should know about?
Zombies. That's the obvious thing. I'm going to jump in first, that way nobody else can take it. But obviously with Romero, the zombie movies are, I think, the main thing that, we're associated with. And there's like a great, north of Pittsburgh, I think it's still there, is the Living Dead Museum, actually, in the town where they shot, the graveyard scene in Night of the Living Dead. And it's a great museum. So if anybody ever wants to visit the Pittsburgh area, it's, I think, about 45 minutes north of the city, but it's a really neat little place. So it's definitely worth going to. So I feel like, Romero is the big thing. And then obviously, Night and Dawn and Day of the Dead, but then also Creepshow, which I did not know was filmed in Pittsburgh until maybe 10 years ago. And when I was a kid, I was so scared of Fluffy, that thing in the crate. And like, if I would have known that because I only grew up about 90 minutes from Pittsburgh, if I would have known that Fluffy was born that close to where I was, I would have been even more afraid. Like, I was like, oh, I'm sure Fluffy was born out in Hollywood and that's a far away. No, Fluffy was local. And I'm still really, I am so glad I didn't know that as a kid, because I would have been terrified.
I like what I agree, and I like what Doug was saying about Pittsburgh being a haunted place, a place of industrial ghosts, and you watch the greenery growing up through the ruins of the steel mills. I find a lot of inspiration there, and a lot to write about there. So, in addition to the zombies, I would say that this is a place of American ghosts, of industrial ghosts, and haunted steel steel mills. And I've been exploring some of that in my writing. And I know that Stephanie Wojtowicz, who sometimes joins us here, has also found great inspiration there. So I think there's a lot more to be written about those kind of places, the haunted steel mills of Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
I just want to echo Larry there. I think there's a ton of potential with the history of Pittsburgh to write. I especially was thinking earlier today about some alternate history type of horror stories, especially with like the death of industry in Pittsburgh. And there's kind of like a fun, almost seedy type of atmosphere to the South Side. There's lots to explore with Pittsburgh. Lots to explore.
Well, and you also have a rich history of battles here as well, from the French and Indian War and the Rev War. And it's located at the convergence of 3 rivers. What's more magical than that?
Well, actually, it's at the convergence of 4 rivers, as I understand it. The subterranean 4th River, very magical.
Oh, right. I always forget about that.
Messes with the stream of time. Very important Pittsburgh detail. A lot of the stuff comes to us via that river. As far as Pittsburgh inspiration, like I love that detail. I love that that's lore and that people talk about it on their porches, with an Iron City. And, I've had conversations with these guys on the porch who look like grizzled sea captains, and they got one leg. And they want to tell you about the B-52 bomber that went down in the Monongahela and disappeared without a trace. They want to tell you this stuff, and it's pretty wonderful. But as far as inspiration, I mean, it's everywhere.
What's really impressive about it is that I think the first time I came in through, I think, one of the tunnels at night, and there are few things as dramatic as coming out of that tunnel and just seeing everything lit up. It's like, whoa, where did this come from? And if you've lived outside of Pittsburgh, there's a definite idea of this industrial steel blue collar thing. But once you see the city, it's like, what is this? This is nothing like you see in any of those movies from the 70s, like The Deer Hunter or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
That type of industrial looking stuff. It's a very beautiful, iconic looking city.
Well, right. And I mean, Pittsburgh is literally returned from the dead, right? So it's very uncanny and it's very nature. And, as a Rust Belt kind of city, I mean, maybe Gwen could talk more about this. She's the author of The Rust Maidens, which is kind of all about this kind of issue. But, we live in this where the past is never gone. I remember when I was first getting ready to move out here, and somebody had asked me, like, well, have you ever been to Pittsburgh? I'm like, well, no. I mean, I'm a fan of the Steelers and all that. I've never been there. I'd love to, check it out. I can't wait to see what it's like out there. And she said, well, you seem like you're scared. I was like, well, yeah, I've heard it's pretty filthy. I'm afraid to breathe, but otherwise. And she's like, no. I was there recently. It's not like that anymore. They've experienced a renaissance, and you'll probably hear all about it. But you just need to remember that all that stuff is not filth. It's history. And I thought that was great. I've always kept that in mind, especially when I've gone to some dive bars. But, that's what we write about, is kind of that impulse to repress the things that we're afraid of, be they filth, germs, disease, or the past, right? The kind of past histories that are about mistakes we've made, things that embarrass us, the dark side of human history. It's omnipresent. You can't escape it. And our environment reminds us of that. So maybe it primes us to write about it too. I think I'm going to toss the ball to Gwen, though, to talk a little bit more about that kind of Rust Belt anxiety. And then, if you have a question for the panel, Gwen, you can spin it and pivot it around.
I'm the author of The Rust Maidens, which is all about sort of urban decay and, girls actually. It's based in Cleveland because I'm originally from Ohio, but I know a lot of people from the Pittsburgh area have said, yes, it reminds me a lot of everything here because this is the steel city and it all has to do with steel mills and decay and girls turning into the decay. And I do think it's such a rich history. And, I'd never actually been in a steel mill until after I wrote The Rust Maidens. It had just come out and, or was about to come out, I think. but it was already done. And I actually went into one through Rivers of Steel, I think it's called. Like they're like a historical thing, and they actually do tours where you can go in and take pictures of like rusted out steel mills, and it's like, you know, right in the Pittsburgh area. So it's like, and I do think that that's an interesting thing of like really embracing that past rather than saying like, oh, we're gonna forget that it happened. Like these are places that are like preserved steel mills, and they go in and you do like these photography things, you know, and I got all these pictures of this rusted out steel mill. And so it's definitely something that I do feel like we've, you know, it is a cleaner city. Every city in the 70s though was terrible. Like all the city, pretty much every major city, we just polluted like mad back then. Not that we're great now, but we're better than the 70s, you know. And so it you know, we have moved forward and progressed and had progress in some ways, but then I do think that, you know, embracing that past, and I think horror, like you said, I think it helps us to be able to embrace that past and see the past. Yes, it can be scary, but really kind of taking it and thinking of ourselves more as being this whole of like everything, you know, that's happening. Well, I'll say, if I have to have a question, I know one of the things we said was like any urban legends from the area. I always love that. So like, what urban legends do you guys know from the area? Like I'm from Ohio, so I know a little bit more Ohio urban legends, but I'm always excited for what like urban legends people know from the Pittsburgh area.
This wasn't necessarily a legend, but it kind of ties back to the history we were talking about. But Pittsburgh was home of one of the first crematories in the United States, and I wrote a short story about that. It's in Unnerving magazine, and it's called Pyre for the Almost Dead. But I wrote about a girl that has Cotard delusion, which is where you think you're basically a corpse, you think you're dead, and she's trying to get herself into the crematory. But it's really interesting just to Google the crematory and read about its history. It was called the Les Moines Crematory, I believe, and it was in Franklin Township, and it was along Gallows Hill, which is the most perfect real life name for where it was located. But I think about that a lot, of something that was invented in the 1800s in this crematory, and all the kind of ghosts you can kind of take from the history of that too. So not necessarily an urban legend, but I think something that you could probably turn into your own ghost story or your own urban legend. And Pittsburgh presents a lot of opportunities for that, because along with all the rust and the decay and the steel, we also have little tidbits like that of having, I think it was the first crematory in the United States, if not just one of the first, but there's a lot of stuff to explore there.
That explains
There are a lot
all the
of
ash.
a lot of funeral homes in Pittsburgh. As a matter of fact, this city has more than just about any other city. I remember reading about 15 years ago that there were over 400 funeral homes in Pittsburgh. And the reason is because of the mountains and the valleys and the rivers divides this place up into very well-defined neighborhoods. And so when people immigrated here, they went to their certain neighborhoods and they brought with them their customs. And the big customs that they brought, of course, were the burial customs. And so every neighborhood had its special burial customs, which is why the first crematorium is here, and which is why so many funeral homes are here to fill the specific needs of the dead.
The needs of the dead.
Don't want to let them down.
Writing that down.
So I don't know if this would be if this would count as an urban legend, but sort of weird things that you can discover, particularly even through like archival research, was we at the university have the history of all of the morgue reports and the coroner reports in the city, and a big thing that we assign our students to do is to go through and transcribe these and get them into a digital format so we can actually search for them, because people love to do genealogical research and they contact us about the entry, and they're all handwritten, and the scanning technology can't quite pick it up, so we have to transcribe them. And I had a student working on it, and she started to get really concerned because the same address kept popping up over and over and over again as a place where people died, and it's one of the hotels in downtown. And so she was transcribing from the 1912 to 1917. So I don't know what was going on there, but apparently this hotel, I guess, was where a lot of people went to go die. So figure out which one. And, for those of you that are the writers here, it could be a good inspiration for a story.
There should be an anthology about this, and a lot of cities have done things like that. But there are books, nonfiction books, about urban legends and Pittsburgh history. And I mean, I'm drawing blanks because I'm trying to remember which tunnel it is that someone's described as being a haunted tunnel.
I think you're thinking of Green Man's Tunnel.
Yeah, that sounds like it.
I make an annual pilgrimage out there every year around Halloween because that scared me as a kid. That scared me hearing about that. So
They also call that guy Charlie No Face here.
Yeah.
Like other places have Green Man, but ours is Charlie No Face.
yeah, it's like an unfortunate tale of a real life person who suffered a severe electrocution that deformed his face, but supposedly his ghost haunts the tunnel because he used to walk past it or something. I don't know, but
I hear Mary Shenley haunts the Cathedral of Learning. Like Mary Shenley, who
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. I think there's lots of urban legends on the Pitt campus, and the Cathedral of Learning being the main academic building on the university's campus. That in the libraries, of course, and in the cathedral in particular. And certainly, Shenley was in that area. I'm sure Henry Frick is haunting, to, come, anytime a union is, rumored to happen, I'm sure he comes out to haunt, the folks trying to do that. But, I think the labor history here and the, history of repression and, the steel strikes and the Pinkertons, also kind of leads to that ability to have these really great myths.
Well, wasn't the city designed in a specific way to be able to crowd people in case there was an uprising?
Well, now.
Really? I never heard that. Wow. I can see that.
I think that's a fact. I think that's a fact.
That's a good location for that.
Yeah.
The Squirrel Hole Tunnel is hell.
Well, the tunnels keep coming up. And to dovetail back a little bit to the question of fiction set here, I mean, this is maybe cheating a little because it's, movies, but wasn't the tunnel scene, the notorious tunnel scene in the 90s version of The Stand, the miniseries?
Yes, the Armstrong Tunnel served as the Lincoln Tunnel. That's right.
The tunnle. I mean, who among us has driven through those tunnels without feeling like there's something that could happen?
Well, the traffic basically comes to a halt and nobody can just drive through the damn tunnels. So
Gwen and I just had a conversation on Twitter about the anxiety of sitting in traffic before the tunnel. That should be like a terrifying urban legend in itself.
Yeah.
Totally. And when you get stuck in those tunnels, and then I always love it when you go through one of them and you get to a certain point where even the radio cuts out. And you're like, that's it, I'm cut off.
Yeah.
I'm cut off. If this thing collapses, I'm done. I just got to go on faith that I'm getting to the other side.
There's a weird thing with tunnels in Pittsburgh that's not anywhere else I've been. Like I grew up like an hour outside of Manhattan. So you'd go through the Lincoln Tunnel, and if you're doing 50 in the tunnel, like going into the tunnel, you maintain your speed and you maintain it on the way out. Here, for whatever reason, if it's a tunnel, everybody expects that there's going to be a sheer drop at the end, so everybody hits their brakes before they get out of the tunnel. Like, is it safe to come out? It's really, really kind of weird.
It is kind of like that feeling of being in a crypt, too. It's like, might be the closest you get if you're an urban commuter to actually being in the crypt and buried alive. And it scares the shit out of me. I get claustrophobic if there's a traffic jam, and I just think the whole mountain's going to collapse on me.
And no proof that it won't.
Yeah, exactly. Like, you're there and you're like, it's the first time you're really sitting there and you're kind of looking up and you're like, oh yeah, there's this mountain above me. Like, I understand that there's engineering involved in all of this, but engineering can fail. This is going to be the day.
And that's the thing, right? Like with the modern expansion after the industrial era, we made skyscrapers, we made bridges that are way too high in the sky, and we're so dependent on all this all this engineering that is crumbling beneath us now. And hopefully in the near future there'll be some kind of infrastructure repairs. But we have more bridges in Pittsburgh than almost any place else. It's like as many as in Venice, I believe. Pittsburgh is is rife with this kind of architecture. I don't know, maybe we could talk about some other places that aren't necessarily haunted, but that, like, if somebody were to come to Pittsburgh as a tourist for maybe a future StokerCon or something, where would we take them? I mean, I got the ideal location. I'll just start with it right off the bat. The Monroeville Mall. We'll scare them in the tunnel before we get there.
Right.
And then we'll end up at the Monroeville Mall, which is kind of like a shrine for George Romero, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
And for
that's
anyone who
definitely-
isn't from Pittsburgh, that's where Dawn of the Dead was filmed. I realize because we're from Pittsburgh, we're not necessarily like qualifying this, and people are like,
Yeah.
what are they even talking about? So Dawn of the Dead was filmed in Monroeville.
It's the scariest mall.
Right. Yeah. So it's like 10 miles outside of the city, in the museum that Gwen was alluding to earlier that had been up in Evans City, which is the cemetery where Night was filmed and also where Crazies was filmed. They just moved like 2 months ago to the mall.
Oh, okay. So they're in the mall now.
It's all at
Okay.
the mall now. So there's a bust of Romero that a local artist created that's out at the mall. So definitely the sort of Romero, and I get a lot of these questions, through the archive of where all to go. So the Monroeville Mall, the Evans City Cemetery, and then you even just driving around the city, you can see so much of how the city played as a text within his film. The campuses of both the University of Pittsburgh and Carnegie Mellon University were featured quite frequently in his films, as well as the houses he lived in the city and just regular neighborhoods. So, even just coming into the central area of Oakland, which is a neighborhood with the universities, so much of it was filmed right there, and including Silence of the Lambs, which
Getting ready to
will be
say that
the
one. I was like,
30-year anniversary was filmed in these one scene was filmed in the Soldiers and Sailors Memorial, which is on the Pitt campus. It's the scene when he's in the cage and bites a guard's face off. Romero has a cameo in that scene, but he is not the one who gets his face bitten off.
Really? I did
Yeah.
not know he had a
He's one of the
cameo in
guards.
that scene.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
Wow.
Prior to the pandemic at Soldiers and Sailors, they used to actually rebuild the cage every Halloween. They did it 2 or 3 years in a row. Like my husband and I went and they rebuilt
Wow.
the cage, and it was like kind of like darkly lit and everything. And it was like
Yeah.
the whole Silence of the Lambs thing. They also shot part of Silence of the Lambs at the museum, the Carnegie Museum, the science center. When she goes past all of the dinosaurs, those are actually all there. So, and if you want to get a little bit outside of Pittsburgh, they are opening up a bed and breakfast in Buffalo Bill's house.
Yeah,
Like that
I
is
saw that.
happening. That is that. I don't know it's open yet, but that's been all over the local news. So if you want to stay in Buffalo Bill's house and have a very nice bed and breakfast, like that's going to be what you can do.
Extended
That's like
stay.
about an hour outside. But
It puts the oatmeal in the basket or it gets the whole.
And there's also a lot of great, nature areas. I don't know if you guys all know about the Dead Man's Hollow,
Oh,
which
yeah.
was
Oh,
a
yeah.
sewer pipe, structure that there was also like different murders there, I believe. So it's like haunted, but also nature. And there's tunnels that go underground, so you can kind of, bring a flashlight and a friend.
cool. I didn't know about that one. See, I'm like
There's
making
a
notes.
lot of that. There's a lot of that in Coulterville too. That's like a ghost hunting hub. There's lots of old cemeteries out there, in like
one
the
with the
13
bends,
bends and things like that. Yeah, that's a super cool location for just freaking yourself out.
Yeah, there's a lot of inspiring places, and you all seem to have a whole like map of places you could go to write horror at any moment. I did have one quick question for Ben. I hope this isn't too trivial for the audience. Is the amusement park film that's coming out on Shudder, is that set in Kennywood?
No, it's not Kennywood. It was the old Westview Park that is defunct. Yeah, it was shutting down around the time he filmed it there, which is part of the reason he was able to use that as a filming location. So
That's coming to Shudder? That's coming to Shudder?
it's
Yeah.
coming to Shudder, I think, in exactly a month from when we're recording this right now. So early June. They just released a trailer that's really, really well done. So it is probably his most terrifying film while not being a horror film. and really fits in, which I think is another sort of piece of what's important of what he did, but also I think maybe what you see through the city is the, his incorporation of social issues within his horror and his storytelling. And the amusement park is probably one of the best examples of that, although, night is always held up that way. But I think that connects too with, not just his storytelling and understanding the social value and seeing, that kind of that interaction with labor and race relations that were happening in Pittsburgh, but is connected to the larger literary history of Pittsburgh, particularly through August Wilson and the sort of Renaissance, Black Renaissance that was in the Hill District in the center of town.
Well, we've talked about places, we've talked about urban legends, we've talked about some of the stories. Are we forgetting anything?
Well, how about the world premiere of Night of the Living Dead back in 1968, October 1st. That was quite an event in Pittsburgh. And I saw it. I got a chance to see it. This is a story for you. I got a chance to see it in my study hall in high school.
Wow.
Here, that's the teaser, and here's the story. So I hear that this movie is coming out, right? And so I go into study hall, and I'm fresh in from Philadelphia. I don't really know this area that well. And the kid next to me sits down, and he just starts going. He says, "I just saw the best movie I've ever seen. It's amazing." And he starts, and people are in a cemetery, and then there's this, and he goes through the whole darn movie. And after every scene, he says, "And it's the best movie I've ever seen." This is 45 minutes through study hall. I got the whole movie. The best movie he'd ever seen. I got the whole movie in 45 minutes. And what's really funny? I actually thought I had seen the movie until somewhere around 2008 or some darn thing. And I realized I'd never actually seen it, that everything in my mind was just from this ninth grader telling me the best movie he'd ever seen and giving me the synopsis. And that's the kind of movie it is. It gets into your head. It's primal. And when I saw it, what is cool? What is amazing is this is one of the few films that actually lives up to the dream. It actually exists in your nightmare and is your nightmare. And he pulled that off beautifully. And something else I was able to, this is just a little personal story, a little personal aside, but I used to do a lot of theater in Pittsburgh when I was in high school. And it turned out that a lot of the people that I had been doing theater with back in the 60s, not the early 60s, late 60s, were in that film. And so for me, finally getting to see it in 2008 was not only the realization of this nightmare that had been existing in my head for all that time, but it was also a chance to see all these cool people, Pittsburgh actors. Everybody in that film if you've lived in Pittsburgh for a while and you've gone to Pittsburgh theater and you know the town, there are so many iconic Pittsburghers in that, from Billy Cardell, the guy who hosted our Chiller Theater for many years, to A.C. McDonald, a character actor who plays the general who says, I don't think it was a satellite, when they're interviewing him in Washington, D.C. All these people, these people are great Pittsburgh celebrities. So that's my George Romero connection.
I actually used to be in a band with a Dawn of the Dead zombie for a couple of years. A little shout out to Mr. Robert Getz. Hey, Bob. That's it. That's my whole.
I mean, it's a symptom of George Romero's kind of connection with community. And he was really proud. I got the sense watching one of the special Zoom sessions that Ben actually hosted a little while ago about the archives, that, this was a breakthrough film for Pittsburgh. It put Pittsburgh film on the map. It had the big, launch that Lawrence was talking about, and even today, filmmakers come to Pittsburgh to shoot. There's something about it. Maybe it's cheap, but the labor's good. People here love movies. I believe The Dark Knight was shot here, right? The majority of it. A lot of it.
Yeah, Dark Knight Rises. Right?
Dark Knight Rises.
Third one. Yeah. I forgot.
Also, I feel personally like the impact of Night of the Living Dead may sometimes get overlooked because of how commonplace zombies are.
Yes.
But I feel like without Night of the Living Dead, we wouldn't have things like The Walking Dead or 28 Days Later or things like that. So that had a massive, massive global impact on this subgenre of horror. So,
oh, definitely. My T-shirt says it's the zombie capital of the world. You got to see my beer gut there, but you know, people associate this place with the living dead. That's great.
Yeah, and I think that's all, you know, that's true. And it, you know, it made a film industry in Pittsburgh. And even if it disappeared for a while, it's come back. And, you know, part of it, yeah, is the tax incentives that are given out. But, you know, I don't think that people would think to come to Pittsburgh without the establishment of the film industry that Romero did. And so many of his friends, and as Larry was saying, you know, so many of the connections to theater, that's been one of the most surprising things to me, is like how ingrained in the theater scene so many of those actors and producers were, you know, but even these connections to the sort of like greater media scape of, you know, one of the first radios and broadcast networks and with WQED, and, you know, even his connections to Fred Rogers and Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. I mean, Romero got a lot of his early work in industrials and commercials through these types of connections, and even directing a couple of episodes of Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. The one where he got his tonsillectomy is the most famous, which kind of makes sense. But you know, but it is all these sort of connections that really led to a media environment in Pittsburgh that probably wouldn't have existed otherwise.
Right. And, you know, you mentioned Mr. Rogers, classic, right? But that's like, you know, PBS, and I kind of put that in the same box as independent cinema, that it was fighting the mainstream, and kind of the artistic energy that we get is very indie, and horror is, you know, rife with indie impulses and strengths right now in indie publishing and whatnot. Yeah, so that's great. All right, we've got about 10 minutes left. So, you know, normally we'd open the floor up to questions from the audience. So if anybody's watching this live next week or whatever, feel free to post a question in the chat room. But does anyone here have a question for your co-panelists, I wonder?
I'm
What's
interested.
everybody working on? I want to ask what everybody's working on. Like that way we can all share what we're doing next. What's Pittsburgh's next big thing? So.
All right. Anyone want to take that?
Oh, come on. You guys are all working on something. I know all of you.
Well, I actually had a question. So we all kind of like follow each other and stuff. Like we're a really, really cool, tight-knit chapter. We're all very friendly. And I love watching to see what everybody else is working on. And Sara dropped a tweet, I think it was yesterday, about a novel that she's worked on in reference to like the cicadas, like the 17-year cicada thing. I'm like, where's the Sara novel? I want to see the Sara.
I was just thinking that this week. Sara's been talking about that novel, and I saw things about Brood X. That's this year's cicada. We have the 17-year annual cicadas that come just on the eastern side of the United States. I thought there were other places, but I was reading this article. No, it's just eastern side of the United States. And so, yeah, so that's something we're all looking forward to, Sara, is your cicada novel. So FYI.
Well, it's done. Someone just has to publish it. It's actually called, well, right now it's called Brood X. I just thought that would be a good title. So I don't know, if someone opens up to book publishing this year, I guess I'll submit it.
And, you know, great stuff, Gwen. And I didn't mean to duck out. I was losing power. I was listening to your story, but I was losing power. I had to go plug in. But great stuff. Yeah.
And Sara, you're actually editing an anthology soon. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, I should plug that. It's my brain this month. But I am editing another anthology of women in horror with Strange House. It's called Chromophobia, and I'm going to be looking for horror stories inspired by colors. So making colors very creepy and weird and strange. All of the submission guidelines should actually be up next week. So if you follow me on social media, if you follow Strange House / Rooster Republic, all those guidelines will be going up. I'm very excited. I think this is going to be a really unique anthology.
Yeah, I was fortunate I've been fortunate to work with many of you, and fortunate to work with Nelson on the Wicked Library while Nelson was there. And that's one great thing about Pittsburgh is the opportunities that there are here, not only for writing horror, but for getting horror out in front of an audience. And I've been working on a podcast for an outfit called Prime Stage Theater, a mystery podcast that is based right here in Pittsburgh. And also this November, I have an adaptation of Frankenstein coming out on the Prime Stage Theater, provided everything goes as planned and the city does open back up. And so we are going to have a world premiere of a new version of Frankenstein here at one of the city's premier theaters. And beyond that, I have to leave Pittsburgh to head out west. I have a couple of film projects in works out there, and I hope to be telling all of you about more information on those in the months ahead. Some of it's hush hush, some of it give me a couple beers and I'll tell you all about it. But some very exciting stuff happening.
We're all looking at you, Corey.
No. No, I'm submitting, novel poetry collection, working on another novella. So here's hoping this summer have some good news for you all.
And Corey's thesis novel uses a lot of places from Pittsburgh too. You didn't talk about that, but the novel that he wrote for grad school, that's very good and uses a lot of Pittsburgh places.
Yeah, I was going to say, it was very nice because I lived there, so I just go drive it around, and that counts as homework, I definitely think so.
I've got a ton of short stories circulating. I've got a couple coming out here in Novel Noctule and Penumbra. So happy about that. I'm retooling a novella as well. Been really enjoying that form lately. So feeling good, plugging away, Always make music too. So
Isn't Pittsburgh a great music town?
Oh, sir.
I have really missed the performing, but you got to admit, I mean, Pittsburgh for music, for original music, for indie music, this is the place. This is a great music town.
Yeah.
I would agree with you, Larry, and I would add that it's probably more vibrant. And no offense to anybody watching this, if you're from New York, I played in the Village and stuff. It's a more fun music scene here when there's not a pandemic. But it's a great music scene. It's a lot of great original stuff out there.
Yeah, it's a rocking town, right? It's WDVEs. If anybody comes to Pittsburgh, tune that in. You're going to hear the classic rock hits that you thought were long gone, but are still playing forever on DVE. But I bring that up because I think the popular radio actually was born in Pittsburgh as well. I think one of the first radio stations.
That's right.
Kind of streamed music was from Pittsburgh. So.
WYEP. Yeah.
There you go. There you go. Something I'm working on right now that I guess I should spread the word about is many of you guys know Tim Wagner. He has a book, Writing in the Dark. It's a great how-to write book that was recently published by Raw Dog Screaming Press, who I've worked with for many years now. And he asked me to do the foreword to that. So I'm writing that right now. And wait, the foreword, I'm sorry, to the workbook that is coming out related to that book, which is like a new textbook in writing horror. So if anybody watching this is a horror writer in training, get Tim Wagner's book and look for that workbook too.
Nice.
He actually asked me for a story prompt for that too.
Oh, that's right. He was doing that. Yeah, so that should be really cool. There's only one book for horror prompts. I won't mention the title of that.
Maybe you should, Mike.
Maybe you can.
All right. Is there anyone else who wants to share what they're working on? Because we got to wrap this up.
I've got something really important I wanted to share before this ended. And that is, have you guys been to the National Aviary on the north side? Anybody?
I'm obsessed with the National Aviary. Like the third of the proceeds for my Bram Stoker nominated The Invention of Ghosts actually went to the National Aviary. I'm obsessed with birds and I love the aviary. So the answer is yes.
Well, very good. Not everyone may know that aviary is built on the foundation of the 19th century penitentiary on the north side.
Ooh.
It exploded in a natural gas fire. Wow. And some of those old timers sitting on porches will tell you that the ghosts of the prisoners who died that day speak through the birds.
Ooh, oh man, I love that. I've never heard that. That's great. I love it. Haunted birds. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Like I didn't know this could be like, wow, this just took a great turn. Thank you for that.
And maybe even the baby sloth that they roll up to the farm.
Sloth at the-
Maybe.
There's bats at the aviary too. Maybe they're speaking through the bats.
I would hope so.
Isn't there like a buzzword that you call like convicts that's bird, like something bird, stoolie bird,
Jailbird or
jailbird?
stool pigeon.
Gwendolyn cut with the dead speak through the beaks.
Yes.
Let's have an anthology of prison bird story.
The
That's great.
Birdman of Alcatraz.
Yeah, let's go.
Right on, Michelle.
The Birdman of the National Aviary. There we go.
Well, it's too bad that that Poe wasn't from Pittsburgh, because like immediately thinking the Ravens are the Steelers' arch rivals, and all that. But we're all the Poes of Pittsburgh working today, right? We're the Poes of Pittsburgh. So anybody watching this, if you're thinking about a good city to come to, Pittsburgh is the place. Let us know that you're here. You can join the Pittsburgh chapter of the Horror Writers Association. We'll welcome you, and you get to talk with us about these things that we discuss every couple of months together. So this is Horror Town. Anyway, any last words? We've got 2 minutes.
Thanks everybody for joining us.
Yeah, thanks. Hope to be in person with you guys one day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay, well, thank you StokerCon for hosting this and having this panel, and we'll see you all later.